Okay, I'm sorry I had to break this up. I had a phone call and I can't record while the phone call comes in. So I'm going to just read that paragraph again because that was she's kind of getting into some nitty gritty here. She said, and two, with Elvis, there were all those other women. I could never have the kind of open marriage where I shared my husband with others. At that time in my life, I could never have accepted that kind of relationship, and that is the only kind he really wanted, an open marriage. He just was not a one-woman kind of guy. When I matured, I looked back and saw that any marriage Elvis and I might have had would not have lasted long. We made better friends than lovers, and right there is the raw truth of the matter. In fact, I don't see how long-term marriage to Elvis could have worked out for anyone. I know I can already hear a million women out there screaming, I could have done it, I could have done it. But an entertainer's work is such a demanding part of their life, you can't just punch a time clock and turn it off and on. Unfortunately, it's usually only the people in the entertainment industry that understand how all-consuming the commitment is. How do you tell your mate, excuse me, dear, I have to be alone for a few days to prepare for my work? Elvis was also cool on Priscilla pursuing her own ambitions. She wants a career. One career in the family is enough. True, two professionals and one marriage are hard to handle. But when one of them is a superstar, it becomes close to impossible. Gladys had told Elvis that it would not be good for him to marry someone else in the entertainment industry also because their two career paths would clash and they would not be able to spend much time together. And he took that to heart. He really did. And here he's saying Priscilla wants a career, but one career in the family is enough. And that's where that came from. There are those who would like to imagine that Elvis was destroyed by Priscilla's leaving him. Although certainly a contributing factor to his stress, and it did upset him, it was not the killer it has been purported to be. That's because that is Priscilla's narrative. And people that want to be on her side will take that narrative. But no, that was not the case. It was not the killer. It upset him because, one, the Christian in him, more likely the Christian side in him, and the foundation that he grew up in is there's one marriage. You get married one time and it lasts forever. So that's one thing. So he felt like he was a failure at marriage. Second, there was a daughter, and now they're going to have to split time with her. So yes, that upset him, and he did not want Priscilla to keep Lisa from him. So there was that. But the biggest, I think, was the fact that he failed at a marriage. And that was the part that was the worst part for him. And his ego was hurt that she chose another man over him. It's like, who would want anyone over me? But that's a lot of men. That's a lot of men. They have egos. That's just the way men are. So he did get over it and was looking forward to being a free man, accepting that he and Priscilla were just not right for each other. It's true they maintained a cordial relationship after the divorce, in part for Lisa's sake, and partly because it wasn't in his nature to shut anyone totally out of his life that he'd ever truly cared anything about, no matter what had happened between them. The reason Linda Thompson lasted so long is because she let him do his thing, see other women while she was there, at home and on the road. I know there are a lot of women who can look the other way and still love their man, but to constantly have it going on right in front of you and not have it bother you, I thought was rather unusual. Elvis lavished elaborate gifts on Linda and her family. He gave her credit cards and a free hand in spending. Vernon was beside himself about her spending habits, but it didn't faze Elvis. It was nothing for her to go out for an hour and spend $10,000 or $15,000 on a fur coat or something. Good grief. Well, I need it for the tour, she would say. But she did dress well, and she looked gorgeous, and Elvis liked that. After Linda, his next and last serious relationship was with Ginger Alden. Elvis was very happy and in love with Ginger, and did, in fact, at one point, want to marry her. In fact, he looked happier than I'd seen him in years. At that point, with Ginger, for the first time since I'd known him, he was monogamous. I believe a man is monogamous if he really, really loves a woman, and I, for one, was glad he'd found someone that made him so happy. Well, he was monogamous with Linda that first year, and this was kind of Ginger's first year, so to speak. But I think it was too much for Ginger to deal with a dying Elvis. She was just too young. I don't think she realized how serious his condition really was. She was in deep water over her head with a terminally ill man. Yes, she was 19 when she met him and turned 20 like a month later. So she was very young. And Elvis had a lot of serious problems going on at that time. It became obvious their age difference was a real barrier, but that wasn't all. She couldn't handle the routine of being on the road with him. She cares more about her family than she cares for me, he told me. I'd even pay to bring her whole family along, but she wanted to go home. Of course, it's understandable that the road would prove too much for her. I know that it's fatiguing, but it can also be boring unless you are a performer waiting to go on and do your next show. It's a case of two different worlds, and it's very hard for them to mix successfully. With all of this, there is no doubt that I was still in love with Elvis in 1971, but even in my very limited experience with men, I knew that it was a dead end, a relationship without a real foundation. There's no future in this, I remember crying to Elvis once. At first he looked bewildered. Then he replied in a loud and stern voice, "You don't know that." I don't think he had any idea of what I was talking about. Whenever a tour was over, I returned to Los Angeles because that is where my home is, and also because I can easily find work there. One of the first dates I had after my return was with an old friend I had been on the road with for 2 years prior to joining Elvis. I will call him Adam, although that is not his real name. During these 2 years with Adam, I was acutely aware of how physically attractive he was, but I was not ready at that time to give up my virginity for a romantic fling. When we renewed our friendship once again, he was getting over a terrible divorce and was actually in therapy, trying to learn how to cope with his own heartbreak. My hopeless situation with Elvis made the two of us, Adam and I, perfect for one another. Besides, I still found him physically attractive. Well, from that first date, one thing led to another, and we went to bed together. I couldn't have had a better sexual experience than the one with Adam. He often said he wished my first sexual experience had been with him. Adam was an accomplished lover, and no girl on the rebound or otherwise could fault him. He was creative, talented, and exciting. However, I have to confess that although I realized my sexual heights, there was something dead inside of me, as if part of me was gone. There were no bells and whistles, no total abandon. As much as Adam tried, there were no moments where I gave myself entirely to the relationship. Adam and I continued to see one another for 12 years whenever I was in Los Angeles. However, having been on the road himself for years, he was much too realistic to try to swear me to faithfulness. He wanted me to feel completely free on the road. Actually, I think our relationship suited both of us just fine during that period when we needed someone so much. I had finally given up on the idea of a prince on a white horse. My feet were finally on the ground, and Adam helped put them there. Back on tour, I was uncomfortable and ill at ease when I was with Elvis at first. I knew then that I did not want to continue our intimate relationship, that we had to face the truth. Elvis and I had a long talk and both agreed that we could still work together and be friends, but that did not include anything more serious. They're both mature adults. You have your own life to live, and you have to be happy. And if you can't be happy in this kind of relationship, Kathy, I want you to do what you feel you have to do, Elvis said to me, and I was pleased with his thoughtful and mature attitude. The new arrangement seemed to work out well, and I began dating one of the singers in the show. I don't think we made a secret that we were seeing one another, but we didn't flaunt it either. One reason was that the singer was married and was going through a terrible period that eventually did end up in divorce. Elvis knew I was seeing him, but I didn't know he was aware of it until one night when he begged me to stay with him. Nothing will happen. I just need to talk, to be near you, he said over and over. Nothing's going to happen. I just need to talk. I just need to be near you. Finally, I told him that I had a date and couldn't break it. Is it Doug? He asked. I said it was, surprised that he knew about my personal life, although I shouldn't have been. Elvis loves to gossip, and so people gossip with him, and everyone is going to get back to him because he wants to know what's going on with everybody, especially someone like Kathy, who he's had a relationship with, still loves her as a friend, still wants to be near her. He values her friendship. Is it Doug? He asked. I said it was, surprised that he knew about my personal life, although I shouldn't have been. Anyway, Elvis stopped pleading with me to stay with him and never said a word after that. I will admit that this was something of a surprise because everyone else I dated over the years came in for some criticism or rather nasty treatment from Elvis. But he liked Doug, and I think he knew he was going through some very bad times and had great respect for him as a singer. Aw, so he cared for that man, so he didn't give him a hard time or give Elvis a hard time with him or give Kathy a hard time with him or say some bad things. Yet, Elvis could be very possessive and jealous, even though we had agreed to be friends, but not date one another. I recall the time... Okay, dogs are barking at someone out on a boat. Yet Elvis could be very possessive and jealous, even though we had agreed to be friends, but not date one another. Yes. He probably feels like people compare him to the other people. And that probably just kind of puts him in it makes him jealous. He doesn't want someone else to like someone else more than him. His ego. So if he's ever had a relationship with someone, he still doesn't want them to go out with other people. Oh my gosh, listen to this. I recall the time Lee Majors, the television and motion picture star, made a trip to the Las Vegas Hilton to visit Elvis. I love me some Bionic Man, $6 million man. Oh my gosh, Lee Majors, I had such a crush on him when that show was on TV. Red West brought Lee backstage, and I was just getting ready to go on. Lee jokingly remarked, "Ooh, I think I'm in love," just after we had been introduced. Of course, I was flattered. Lee Majors is a very attractive man. Evidently, word got back to Elvis about Lee's complimentary remark. Elvis called me backstage to talk in between shows. When we came out of his private dressing room, he asked Lee to join us, and then Elvis made it clear that I was his property. He made a point of telling me in front of Lee, "He's happily married to Farrah Fawcett. You two stay away from each other." Then he turned to Lee and said, "You stay away from her. She belongs to me." Lee said, "Yeah, sure, Elvis. Uh-huh. Hey, Kathy, you want to go gambling with me over at Caesar's?" I laughed and said, "Sure." Elvis stepped right in, saying, "No, no, no, no way." The following night on stage, Elvis brought Lee onto the stage before his audience, saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my friend Lee Majors." Then he looked over to me and said over the microphone, "Kathy, you look tired. Did you stay up all night with Lee?" Nightly, during different performances, he'd make similar remarks like, "Folks, Kathy's voice may not be clear tonight. She's been spending too much time with Lee Majors." This went on for a week. Every night, in between shows and afterwards, he'd call me into his dressing room. He just wanted to keep me in there alone with him. He wanted to keep me in there alone with him. When he finally called Lee into his dressing room one night, Lee said, "Man, I've been here for days and I can hardly get to talk to you because you've got that Kathy in the dressing room with you all the time." Elvis replied, "You know what it's like, Lee, making love to Kathy with her high voice and everything." Everybody laughed but me. Yeah, it's going a little too far right there. The next evening in Elvis's dressing room, I asked him, "Why are you doing this? We're not seeing each other now. We're not tied to each other. I'm an adult woman and I can make my own decisions." Elvis grinned. "I'm only looking out for you. I don't want you to get hurt." Then he paused and said, "I'm just a jealous guy. You know how I am." This was typical of his attitude toward women he loved and cared about. The next evening after the show, when I was sitting out in the foyer area of Elvis's dressing room, sipping my usual hot tea with lemon and honey, Lee was again talking to me. Suddenly, Elvis entered the room dressed to kill, in black with white trim, and stared at me, sitting next to Lee, who was leaning against the bar. Elvis just pointed at Red, Sonny, and Dr. Ghanem, Elvis's doctor in Las Vegas, and snapped his fingers. In a split second, Red and Sonny were sitting on each arm of my chair, and Dr. Ghanem was standing in front of me, pinning me in from all sides. Elvis just stood there, pointed at me from across the room, and proclaimed, You'll always belong to me, Kathy." He was looking right through me. "You'll understand it further along." Wow. Dressed to kill in black with white trim. I wonder when this was. Did it say when this was? I'm trying to remember. Was it in 71? Maybe a trip to Las Vegas. I don't know when it was, but wow, he really was being jealous, wasn't he? "You belong to me." I really had an inexplicable feeling that this was not just a simple jealous statement, because in his eyes I saw the look of prophecy. Did he know something I didn't know? His statement did, in fact, end up being prophetic, because here I am, even 10 years later, appearing at his fan club birthday celebrations. "You'll always belong to me, Kathy. You'll know by and by." The heavy atmosphere in the room soon turned back to normal as Elvis and the guys started kidding around. But I knew that if Lee and I really wanted to go out together, which wasn't the case, Elvis wouldn't have allowed it. There would have been a big battle. A few weeks following Lee's visit with Elvis, I heard through a friend of mine the word around Hollywood was that Elvis's girl singer was in and out of his dressing room. He wasn't so pleasant to another boyfriend who came to see me in Las Vegas. This man was from my hometown, a tremendously handsome guy who worked in the construction industry. He was the type of man that made heads turn. We got along very well and enjoyed each other's company. Between shows, I met him in the Sweet Inspirations dressing room, and that's where I first introduced him to Elvis. Elvis, I want you to meet a friend of mine from my hometown. Elvis shook his hand and stared at him and then said, Kathy's a good lay, isn't she? My date was speechless and embarrassed. I was livid with anger. I don't blame you. In that one statement, he let my date know that I was his property and we had had an affair. Just previously during the show, he had insinuated by looks and attitude that I belonged to him or that we were really involved. He did that quite often, but I had never seen him so insulting and obvious as he was that night. Wow. Later, when my date took me to dinner in the hotel coffee shop, and the more he thought about what had happened, the more upset he became, and he began hyperventilating. I found myself explaining Elvis's actions. I guess I was apologizing and explaining at the same time. I then had to tell him that Elvis and I had at one time been involved, but that by mutual agreement we had decided to call it quits. I went on to explain that I was as surprised as anyone that Elvis would say something like that. But then again, it was Elvis's kind of dark humor and shouldn't be taken too seriously. It didn't end my relationship with the man from my hometown. In fact, we became more serious and more committed to one another. However, Elvis had almost ruined it, and every time I thought of it, I became angry at his audacity and rude behavior. Even though Elvis did give me problems, he always managed to explain himself away. I became livid and screamed, "What is this? How could you possibly do such a thing? How could you be so rude and embarrass me that way? You're making me hate you. I hate you." His response was two extended fingers moving rapidly back and forth like scissors cutting the air, and said with a grin, "Love and hate go together." Oh my gosh. Just like this. You can't hate anybody you don't love. Love and hate go together. Just like this. Oh my gosh. You can't hate somebody you don't love. Elvis. Oh my gosh. He's right, though. He smiled knowingly. Elvis had made his point and won again. Recently, in an interview, I told the television commentator that Elvis was sometimes like a bratty brother that I just didn't quite know how to handle. One of the complications in having been one of Elvis's lovers was his attitude that you always belonged to him. He never liked anyone he had been involved with to be involved with someone else. It was like putting you in a box, and only he could lift the lid and let you out, nobody else. When I confronted him with this, he admitted it, even joked about it. "You're right," he would say. "That's just the way I am. I can't help it." Once he added, "I guess it's complicated because we work together and I have to see you with another man." He said this as if I never had to see him with another woman. I'm sure everyone who had a serious relationship with Elvis had this problem. I'm sure it was that way with Priscilla, Linda Thompson, or any of the others. You were his property, and that's just the way it was. I also found that once it became known that I had had an affair with Elvis, it often ruined my relationships with other men. They might act at first as if it didn't bother them, but sooner or later, they began feeling that they couldn't measure up, that they weren't as exciting or as a good lover as Elvis. They wanted me to compare them to Elvis or put him down verbally, which I would never do because I loved the man. I respected him, faults and all. Elvis was truly a superior human being, so they could never get me to say anything that was derogatory about Elvis just to make them feel better. That took its toll, as it would in any man-woman relationship. When Elvis let me know the kind of lifestyle he wanted to have, and I knew it wasn't going to be included except at his whim. I had an entirely different attitude about sex and having relations with other men. I was never promiscuous, and I never had one-night stands because I simply didn't believe in them. But if I knew a man well enough, and we had been seeing one another for quite a while, I could see nothing wrong with having sex with him. But there had to be a mutual liking and a mutual respect before I was interested. Elvis didn't like this new attitude, and he always managed to make some snide or even cutting remark whenever my behavior bothered him. But still, we remained friends. There was only one time when I couldn't take his exaggerated jokes about my romances any longer, and I walked off the stage, and it hit the headlines the next day. But that is a story I will tell later. Most times I ignored his sarcasm and let him have his fun. All right, I'm going to stop right here because I've got some things I need to do. Her chapters are so long, and I just can't read another 40 minutes. Sometimes I read for 20 minutes or an hour. So I'm going to stop here and pick up again in another reading.